Hey everyone, welcome back to Trailblazers, the series that showcases the bold HR, talent and L&D leaders who are shaping the future of work with action, not just ideas. Brought to you by our friends at Valence, this is where AI meets real-world results from organizational transformation to workforce empowerment. In each episode, we sit down with the pioneers turning AI theory into practice. And today's Trailblazer is a powerful example of that. David Do, Executive Vice President of HR Global Functions at Shell, is leading bold moves to put AI at the core of the company's global people strategy. In our conversation, he shares lessons from Shell's early AI journey, from data and adoption realities to the quirks of rolling out a skills framework at scale. Hey Nadia, I want to explore the skills that leaders will need most in the next decade. What questions should I ask David so that he shares practical examples, not just predictions? And also personally, how can I keep a curious mindset throughout the interview?
Here's a thoughtful way to ask David for practical examples about future leadership skills. If you could go back and give your younger self one skill to navigate the challenges leaders will face in the next decade, what would it be? This approach naturally draws out stories instead of predictions, helping listeners connect with the lived realities behind emerging trends. To keep your curiosity alive throughout the interview, treat every answer as the start of a new thread. After each response, pause and ask yourself, what genuinely surprised me here? Where's the deeper story or tension? This habit keeps you present and ready to explore, fueling authentic engagement from start to finish.
Thanks so much, Nadia. I'll keep this in mind. Let's jump into the episode. Hey, David, welcome back to the show, my friend. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you very much. How are you?
I feel like we haven't spoken so long. You've been avoiding me.
Well, life has happened in between, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
So that's one of those things.
Well, congratulations, by the way, on the new role. How are you feeling about it?
Thank you. No, it's a great gig. Lots of challenge. Really looking forward to it. Big scope, big responsibility, but that's great.
Yeah. Well, look, let's start with the practical, straight into the deep end. Where is your HR's team's AI journey? You know, where did it begin for you, and what's some of the use cases that really stand out to you that you think would be really interesting to our listeners?
Okay, well, I think it's fair to say we're really only at the start of our AI journey. There's a huge opportunity still out there. And in all honesty, I stand on the shoulder of giants in terms of the HR digital team. So I know that the title of the podcast is Trailblazers. I'm not necessarily going to characterize myself as a trailblazer, but there are a number of use cases which I can run over. So the first one would be in job evaluation. We've been using AI in job evaluation for a while now in terms of putting in a job description. The tool we use, the Ava tool, understands where the role sits, the job title, the compression, etc. And it's able to give an immediate job evaluation answer to a line manager that puts something in the system. So that's the first one. It was probably the easiest one for us to do, developed in-house. The second is applying AI skills and an LXP. More complex. We did that as a pilot last year. Got some interesting insights into that, which we can delve into in a little bit more detail. But now we're looking to scale that, and the challenge is to go between pilot and scale. The third is more of a sort of what we're calling a DEX concierge, a digital employee experience concierge solution, which we are looking to bring in. And that will help individuals as they're searching through policies, etc., to understand answers without necessarily having to go back to our HR operations community. And we see that as a huge enabler, and quite excited about that. And that's a use case which obviously goes beyond HR. And so, across the functions will give us significant upside. And then finally, we're just at this stage turning on copilot inside our HR analytics. So you move between sort of dashboards, which are insightful, but often people aren't asking the questions which really understand what's going on underneath. And the AI is starting to help us to get a little bit more, a little bit further along that journey. So the common thread with all of those is we're seeing AI as a work redesign opportunity. It's not just a tool. We're thinking about what's the problem we're trying to solve, how is the AI going to change the work or the experience. And in all of them, we're thinking about what's needed to scale, both technically, economically, and in terms of the change management.
Yeah. I love that you ended with that part, right? Because it's tempting to just to go down the rabbit hole and chase the new shiny tool, but to your point, focusing on how does this shift how work gets done? How does this change the employee experience, and how do we scale this
Yeah.
as well? Because if you don't do that, you can kind of just get pulled in many different directions as well. With the first one that you mentioned in terms of job architecture, job roles, etc. You said you built that in house. Is that right? What was the
Yeah,
decision making process behind that? Just out of curiosity.
well, at that stage, there wasn't really wasn't a solution out there. We needed something that would be, price point enabled, and it was something that we thought we could do relatively easily. And we took it more in an automation than an artificial intelligence solution in the first instance.
Yeah.
So, that was broadly the thinking. It didn't really require too many different integrations, so it was simple. I think as you get into something that requires more architecture, more integrations, data mastery, it becomes something where you probably don't want to do it in-house.
Yeah.
So, that was largely where we went with the skills and the LXP solution.
Yeah. That's an interesting one because I see so many companies going through this, and now AI has just changed the game completely. I was speaking to a HR executive recently that has spent like a year building out their skills taxonomy, and quite frankly, if you've taken a year, by the time you've done that, it's already outdated. With so many skills that are emerging, how has AI helped you in that area, which something in the past took a lot of time and resources?
Well, it does help, but I do think there is something here to your point around the ontology and actually looking at your job architecture, which, does need to be addressed. It's one of the challenges we found. And equally, you end up having conversations around, well, what is a skill and what's a competency?
Yeah.
But in terms of the upside, you get into, well, hidden connections that you didn't believe were there before, adjacent roles, learning paths, and you start to get into real personalization of skills opportunities, learning opportunities, career paths. So that's something we couldn't do at scale. And frankly, as we have been seeking to drive efficiency within the function, that we've tended to focus more on the high value activity. This is something which can democratize that opportunity across a much wider group of people. But you do still have to fix the foundational issues. So, some of the challenges that we've come into have been things like architecture. How do these things connect? Where are you going to master the data? That is really important because you need to think that through in terms of which systems are talking to each other. And then that leads on to the point of integration. So a number of vendors will say that they have open API integrations, and they may have, supported solutions for a particular integration, be it on a particular data object, but they may not have that same agreement on another data object, which is integral to the architecture that you need to put in place. And some vendors work very well together, others less so. And some will work very well on one integration, but less so on another because it is integral to the value that they're trying to protect. So integration becomes a real big problem. And then the third thing that we discovered is, particularly as you get into AI solutions, which are by their nature a little bit more nascent, some of the providers aren't really designed for global regulated organizations. They lack the sort of robust securities matrices, role-based access, data privacy controls. So if a product can't meet those standards, we just can't deploy it at scale. End of story. It comes back to that scale issue. And then the final thing, well, not maybe the final thing, but the data quality issue. AI is really only as good as the input. And HR data, let's face it, can be a bit messy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let me give you a couple of examples. One of them, we had a job called Penguins Manager. Penguins is an asset in the North Sea. So the AI, when applied over that to infer the skills, immediately inferred zoology. Well, that's got nothing to do with the job, right? But it's totally understandable.
Context, right? It doesn't have
Context.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Another one, job title was called WOTL-PNA, right? So Wattle PNA. Now that stands in our language for Wells Operation Team Lead Plug and Abandonment, right? But the average person wouldn't be able to work that out, and the AI certainly couldn't either. It
Yeah.
just didn't stand a chance. So you have to recognize that the AI is learning a little bit like a kid.
Yeah.
And then the final thing is on the change management perspective, coming back to this skills thing, we were end up having conversations with some discipline leads around how many skills on a job. And some were genuinely saying that a job should have 70 skills. I mean, that's just way too many. The idea that anybody turns up with 70 skills out of their toolkit, and I mean, this person would have to walk on water. But the biggest difference, I think, with AI is it will never be as dumb as it is today. It learns, it improves. So the difference with previous tech is as you overlay the AI and as more people go in, actually the matches get a lot better. Whereas in the past, people would say, oh, the technology comes in, unless it works perfectly out of the box, they then don't use it. So I do think AI is a significant game changer, is a real opportunity space, but it's not without the same tech challenges and rate limiting steps as many of the other technologies that we've tried to put in place over the years.
Yeah. On the learning side, I'm really excited about this. I feel like this is one of the areas that I feel like AI is going to have one of the biggest impacts in terms of democratizing skills.
Learning will be, in a sense, the canary in the coal mine on AI, particularly for HR. But then I think the experiential learning, how people learn, they learn through relational stuff. It's not just that we upload information. I do think that that still remains important, but how we deliver learning, of course, is going to change. And that's why, I think learning is generally seen as the big sort of AI revolution that will be the easiest to enact in HR.
Yeah. For the concierge pilots, what's the biggest use case? Because, of course, removing a lot of that admin from the team, but I just want to understand specifically what are some of the things you've identified.
So, I mean, you just have to look at your HR data requests. So, leave requests, payslip requests, policy related requests. There's a huge opportunity there in terms of the concierge service. And it's complex. Different jurisdictions have different policies. Line managers are global, they have global teams. They don't necessarily know the answer,
Yeah.
what the answer is in Philippines versus India. So that's a huge opportunity space. And by doing that, we know that we will be able to drive down the amount of traffic that comes through to HR operations in terms of phone calls and emails. At the same time, we're looking to switch off, phone access for things that you don't need. So today, no one goes into their bank branch to check their bank balance. Really, you shouldn't be doing that. You do it online. So similar sort of things that we're looking to do that will change the way, the experience, but doesn't make it any less of experience, but it provides what people need at the moment they need it.
Yeah. When you zoom out, and I appreciate you're on your journey, and everyone's on their journey. Anyone claiming that they're finished, then I would love to see that. But how do you see AI changing the nature of work itself?
I think this is profound as the first industrial revolution. And I'm fascinated by this. I'm a big geek in terms of, I'm a historian by background, but I've gone and looked at the empirical evidence, and there are four empirical studies that I suggest that anybody go and have a look at. They are broadly looking at content writing, which is the Nguyen Zhang study, customer service, which is the Brynolfsson study, um, uh, basically consulting, which is Delaca, and then the entrepreneurial judgment, which is Otis. And what you're seeing is that there's in a large number of roles and a large number of jobs, you get productivity going up significantly, double-digit increases, depending on the context, between 15 and 40%. And what you see there is productivity increases and productivity and quality distribution narrow. And what's really crucial is it does more for the people with less capability than it does for people with capability. So it takes someone like a sort of a D grade student and makes them a B grade student. That has profound implications because in the longer term, that means that you don't necessarily need people with as many qualifications. It can open up the talent pool. It may lead to a degree of wage deflation over time. The analogy I would draw is, people turning up with tom-toms with black cabs in London. Great for the consumer because prices drop. Not necessarily great if you've done the knowledge and just trained to be a black cab driver. But in other jobs, what you find in the sort of the more complex elements of consulting and entrepreneurial judgments, something outside the jagged technical frontier, there, even though productivity goes up, the quality of the person and how they're using the AI prompt, if someone blindly follows the prompt, the quality of their output, because it doesn't understand the context, back to what we were talking about, actually decreases versus somebody intelligently using it can increase. And the decrease is about 8%, the increase is about 15%. So you're getting a 25% quality output variance. So there, talent management is going to be really, really, really important. The problem, of course, is you've then hollowed out probably the entry roles. You're going to have to think about more deliberate talent management, how you identify those individuals. Probably you won't see wage deflation there, potentially the opposite. So then you've got some really complex challenges. You've got performance management where actually, the sort of noise in the system that might help you to identify someone that's a top performer versus a bottom performer is just not there. You can't see it. Versus, some very high risk reward jobs where the quality of the individual and the performance is absolutely key and can be really important. And then you've got, well, how do you move through the employee and the employee relations angle to this? Because it's fundamentally going to change work. If you get, 20, 40% more productive, hopefully many businesses will be able to grow, but they probably won't grow by that amount. So, as night follows day, if you don't grow by the same amount as your productivity increase, you're going to get less FTE intensive. Now, of course, other jobs will be created that we don't know about at this stage, but the amount of change that's likely to come in the next 10 years is huge. So HR needs to think about how it redesigns performance management, how it redesigns talent management, with a different bifurcation. You're probably going to see big changes to, what is actually being offshored now, substantial change management in terms of how jobs are restructured and redesigned, and all of that going on whilst HR itself needs to go through those changes. Because if you think about where AI excels, sort of that jagged technical frontier, it's on things that are rule-based, process orientated. That's a lot of HR work. There is, of course, a lot of HR work that is outside of that is really high value, succession management, talent management that doesn't necessarily lend itself. But the function itself, I think, is going to change substantively over the next 10 years. Really exciting, where that comes in. Again, the studies show that, when AI is deployed intelligently, job satisfaction goes up. But it's how you navigate through that change that I think is going to be critical.
So much to think about after everything you just shared in that last question as well. What does this mean for the skills and competencies that HR is going to need to be successful in the future?
So, it's very difficult to say exactly what you will need, but the reality is, of course, what happens to it's classic sort of economic theory. So what happens to what you value once you've automated everything else is that rises in importance. So it's going to be a lot of the relational stuff. It's going to be something that is high judgment based. So how you manage change, that's, how you take people through it, very high value. Aspects around succession management and talent management, really thinking about the individuals, the context, the nuance that AI can't do. So if fundamentally what you're doing is relatively rules-based, the chances are a machine will be able to do it better. If it is highly complex, contextual, nuanced, requires, real human judgment, emotional intelligence, that's going to be of high value.
Yeah.
And exactly what the skills are, difficult to tell, but I think that's broadly the space that I see it moving in.
Yeah, it's moving towards the power skills, right, rather than the hard skills. And then
Yeah.
like things like critical thinking are going to be important now more than ever, especially when you could just ask a question and get an answer. Yeah, and that's one thing that I always say that worries me a little bit is that people are not really like, just because you get the answer, do you understand it? Because you didn't really have to have the work to think through it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I'm a historian. So, if I get back an answer from a large language model, I want it to cite its sources. I'll go and read the sources because much like you would get a secondary or tertiary source in history, it's Chinese whispers. As it's retold, the meaning changes. And AI is no different on that. So you've just got to be conscious of that. And the reality is, how do people really understand whether the AI is hallucinating? Its experience is built up over time. So that's going to be critical. The problem, as I come back to, is for a large number of the entry roles that we've all grown up with, they're probably going to end up,
Yeah.
being automated out. So that's the bit that I'm not certain how to solve at this moment in time. Yeah, there's a worry that the sort of AI pulls up the ladder that helps people to get the experience that behind the people that are already in those roles, and that would be bad.
Yeah. Before I let you go, for those people that are just starting their journey, because there are some people that are pretty late to the game, what advice would you give them?
Firstly, think about where you can pilot. Experimentation is key. But as you think about piloting, think about what's technically feasible, what are the barriers to scaling, and then think about the economic viability. In a lot of things that HR is designing and a lot of things that you may want to use, anomaly detection, etc., a lot of the other functions in your business will have the same challenges. Work out who you can, partner up with because that will often make it a little bit more economically viable. And then the final thing I would say is think about where you want the human in the loop, where you really are happy to automate, where you want to augment, and you think you're happy to do that with a few less people, and then where you really want to preserve that human judgment. Think about that from the outset, and you know, good luck.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you, and I wish you all the best till next week.
Thank you for having me.